All right, so everybody, welcome to the Big Ideas in App Architecture podcast. It's been a while that we have come on, and today I have a special guest. The company that I work for, the podcast, is hosted by Cockroach Labs, and today I'd love to introduce you to Peter Mattis, the co-founder, CTO, CPO of the company. How are you doing today, Peter?
I'm doing well. Spring has finally arrived. It's nice outside, so kind of brings a smile to everyone's face.
So, do you have any great plans over this weekend, like around springtime? Do you do something special usually?
No great plans. Just planning to, get outside a little bit more. I'm going to go get a haircut this afternoon, get a spring haircut, and just, get into a little vitamin D action. Maybe get out for a walk or something.
Awesome. All right, that's great. Are you like one of those people? Because I know many people who live in New York City are like, or well, you're not in New York City, but up north, prefer to run. Are you like a runner?
I do CrossFit. I do running as part of that, but most of my exercise is just in my basement gym.
Okay.
I will get out for runs and walks, when the weather's nicer. Really did that during COVID.
Nice.
That was kind of like the escape hatch from being stuck inside all day. And the reason to just think about it this weekend is just like, it's like the flowers are blooming. I live in Greenwich, Connecticut, which is
Yeah,
north of the city. It's like, it's gorgeous right now outside.
beautiful.
It's so wonderful in the springtime.
That's awesome. It's an honor really for me to have you on the podcast. Like when I was asked to do this about a year or 1.5 years ago, I was like, I don't know why they're asking me to do it, but I always wondered if I'll ever get to interview you. So it really is an honor. And I did some stalking, even though I work at Cockroach Labs, and you never go and stalk people online and look for some of the stuff they have done in the past. But you have a great history of working in the tech space. You worked with Spencer, you worked on a product, then you ended up at Google. You did some great things there, Squarespace, and then eventually, you started Cockroach Labs. And it's a company now. We are in our 10th year right now, which is fantastic. So what's cooking at Cockroach Labs? Like, I know a little bit, but for the listeners, tell us a little bit about some interesting things that are in the works right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, CockroachDB is this distributed SQL database, and here right there in the name, distributed. It's like, oh, what do you think of? And also in Cockroach, it's resilient. The product's got to be resilient, and CockroachDB is already very resilient, and yet there's ways that we continue to find to enhance that resilience to make it better. We had this really interesting emission control system, and we're doing a variety of improvements to make the emission control working even better, so that background operations or environmental faults have less an effect on the system. It's distributed. You expect it to be scalable. And we scale to very, very large workloads, and yet we have customers pushing us to scale even further. And then the last thing is just on performance. I mean, performance is always this really fun thing for engineers, and we have this large effort around performance efficiency taking place, and I'm really excited about how that's kind of bearing fruit and what it means. Everybody wants products that are faster and cheaper every year, and
Right.
we want to be on that curve delivering those kind of improvements as well.
That's awesome. One of the things I take away, and when you first said this, and this might be new for the listener, so I'll give you some context. So we do these company all hands, and I remember you came in about a year ago, and you mentioned that the main thing that you want us to focus on as a company, as you develop CockroachDB, is quality. Like, quality is the number one feature, and I actually wrote it down because I'm going to steal that in my life. Like, this is what I heard. But the reason why I bring this up is, about a week or 2 weeks ago, we were at the capital markets event, and you and I were talking, and I brought up the idea that every week we are breaking records of transactions, and one of our customers that we cannot like openly talk about runs on CockroachDB, and you asked me what happened to them. Did they go down or anything happen during the record breaking? So I went and did some digging. I got to know they did have a problem, actually. But the
Uh-oh.
problem was, and here's the catch, was on their mainframe system.
Yeah,
CockroachDB
yeah.
worked completely fine. So, so going back to that thread, when you say quality, I know you've recently, over the last year, have taken over CPO, CTO role at the company. How have you seen all of this shape towards some of the core ideas that you are trying to build with the product?
Yeah, I mean, we use the phrase quality is our number one feature to really drive home that it just needs to be embedded deeply in our psyches and deeply in our souls, deeply in our engineering culture. That
Yeah.
any slip on quality can be catastrophic for our customers. We're very cognizant that our customers are running mission critical, business critical workloads on top of CockroachDB, and a minute, an hour of downtime can be $1 million of, kind of lost revenue or more, huge reputational damages, perhaps additional regulatory scrutiny, regulatory fines going on there. So it's like really internalizing how important the quality of our product is, and that the way you achieve quality is by this kind of never ending attention to it. It's not something you
Yeah.
can like build the quality feature, boom, I'm done. I don't have to pay attention to it anymore. It's like, no, it's like quality day in, day out,
Right.
and that's what I'm really trying to, I beat that drum constantly about quality to make sure we never take our eyes off it. Whatever new whizzy feature comes out, if then we slip on quality, it's like, it does not matter. The
Yeah.
feature literally does not matter if
True.
the system
Totally.
goes down.
I agree. I agree. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, the more I look at the kind of problems we as a company solve, it's amazing to know that people love CockroachDB for the mission and the vision that you guys had when you started the company, the resilience, the scale. I mean, even naming the product Cockroach, just it's awesome. Anyways, so that was a great premise to what we wanted to get into. Technology trends, a bunch of things have been happening for over a decade, and you have seen patterns in this industry, different trends, different ideas come up. But one of the things that when the team was talking about having you on, what I got to know was we wanted to talk about AI, and it's like something that's you cannot ignore right now. It's like in the middle of it, and if you ignore it, it's sort of like blasphemy, right? Like, hey, why are we not talking about this? So let's talk a little bit about that, and tell me a little bit about how you feel about the kind of progress that AI has made the last few years. And with all of this AI conversation started happening with LLMs, were you like a believer immediately? Were you like skeptical, or were you like hey, I'm one of those people, I want to go try it and I want to adopt to it? Like, where were you when a few years ago when we were thinking about GPT-3?
Yeah,
So
yeah. I mean, when these systems first arrived, they were remarkable, and yet they were also kind of a letdown. That you would go use them, and you have some experience like, what? I didn't believe that a computer system could just have that answer it just gave me. I didn't believe it could like give me like in like kind of iambic pentameter Shakespearean voice translate something or come up with. And yet, then you look a little bit closer and just like, I can't really use this for real work. So I had that kind of spike in interest a couple years ago and then kind of wavered. But where my interest remained is I got kind of interested in like, how the heck do these things work,
hmm,
right? So that's where my interest turned. It's like, doesn't seem usable today, but how's this stuff progressing? How's it evolving? And I got, kind of deeply sucked into, it's like, oh, this is the way that these LLM architectures are structured. This is what a transformer is. This is how backpropagation works. There's some really incredible tutorials out there about like, oh, I mean, the very most famous one is the Zero to Hero series from Andre Karpathy.
Karpathy, yeah.
Yeah, it walks you through. It's like, hey, you're just going to build this thing up and understand it. My son then later got interested in himself in mechanistic interpretability, which is this whole subfield of that of like trying to understand like how are these neural nets actually doing what they're doing. And
Right.
kind of crazy little interesting fact, they're still essentially black boxes, but they're starting to learn stuff inside of them about like, oh, this is how they represent, a concept, represent like the Golden Gate Bridge, and they can, with that understanding, like you have like, I mean, it's like safety focused, but it also allows us to design these systems better. And
Right.
I'm just like completely fascinated by the underlying technology there. And then recently, like kind of my opinion on this changed, which is, they started to have these results that were getting published around the, beginning of the year about the new proper reasoning models. And then I was wrapping my head around, I take my eye off it for a little bit, and the reasoning models came out, and I was like, well, this seems different. They're
Yeah.
doing something more interesting. And we got our first exposure, real exposure with the OpenAI Deep Research
Right.
that came out in February. And that was really eye-opening in terms of like, oh, this is actually able to do stuff that, saving me significant amounts of time. And the
Right.
coding stuff has improved significantly. It took my eye off that a little bit. Anthropic with their Claude Sonnet 3.5 model made a really dramatic improvement. I was a little like, I'd say I was mildly late to the game there, but not fully late because, I jumped on board pretty quickly and understand like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, this stuff is actually usable, improving our productivity to some degree now. And then listening to all the researchers. It's not just the heads of the AI companies, but listening to the researchers talk about like they're seeing these things do stuff in the labs, and they're just like kind of like, well, we're just holding on to this rocket ship,
Yes.
and doing our best to guide it, and that all kind of pumped me up with excitement again. So I think that really I got on board with that about 2 months ago.
Yeah, no, that's awesome because I also had a similar moment with deep models, research models that we have. Well, so I recently started playing around with. I was using the OpenAI models, and I like the OpenAI models, but I don't know if you've tried the one that Google released 2.5 weeks ago. It's fascinating the level at
Yeah.
which it works. So my question to you is like a follow up is like, what do you think is different for a reasoning model compared to a regular LLM that is right there? Like, what is your hypothesis? What are they doing behind the scenes?
Yeah. Well, I'll kind of break this down a little bit. So the traditional pre-training models, they're essentially doing imitation learning.
Mm,
There's kind of generally two forms of learning that humans have engaged in. There's imitation learning, where you're told some information and you try to repeat it back, and that's what these traditional pre-training is doing. They're doing next token prediction, but you're trying to imitate what you were trained on. And then the other form of learning is trial and error learning, and this is what reinforcement learning is.
yeah.
And the trial and error learning is kind of fascinating. This is essentially, we know that there are circuits akin to this in the human brain that do this kind of trial and error reinforcement learning. And it's not just the human brain. This is all in kind of, even the most simple neural systems. And the reinforcement learning, we've known about that for like 30 years or so. And there's been various advances. And the most remarkable breakthroughs that you've heard about in the past decade with regards to like superhuman capabilities, this is stuff like AlphaGo, also the AlphaZero that did for chess as well, that some computer system plays beyond human capability. That's all taking place due to reinforcement learning.
Right.
And what has come about the last, kind of year, and really emerged into the public perception over the last couple of months is that they figured out how to apply the reinforcement learning to these pre-trained language models and to great success. And we're just still early days on this curve of growth and scale of reinforcement learning. And that's one of the exciting things about what the future holds is like, they've been scaling these pre-trained models. They didn't see like an end to the benefits to that scaling the pre-trained models. And now we're early days on the scaling of the reinforcement learning, and all these labs are rushing to scale this up as fast as possible.
Right. So, do you feel the models that we have, these deep research models, do you think the difference then is, in my opinion, I am thinking is that like an LLM is like maybe an MOE, a mixture of experts, and it does a bunch of things. So it can have multimodality and stuff like that. But do you think the research models are a little bit more agentic in the
Yeah.
sense like
Well,
they probably are breaking down the problem? Yeah.
yeah, and they're training to do this. This is part of what the reinforcement learning training is doing. They're training
Mm,
them to be agentic. They're training them to use
yeah.
tools. I mean, they're literally like, and some of this tool use is kind of emergent, like they're saying that you have this tool to use, and then they train it to accomplish some task, and it figures out how to use the tools, which is kind of like, you just pause there and like, wow, that's kind of remarkable. And if I
Yeah.
said that statement 5 years ago, you'd be like, bullshit, that's science fiction. And now we're like
Right.
kind of living in the science fiction future, which is like, some days I just forget about it, and other days I wake up and I'm like, what? Like this is like all real right now. And then you combine this with this other fact, which is the models we use today are the worst models you're going to use for the rest of your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
only going to get better.
When you said that, I laughed a little bit deep inside, is because about 2 weeks ago, my in-laws are visiting from India, and so for you and me, we have been in the tech space, and we kind of have a sense of all these cool updates. We took them to San Francisco, and we got them to sit in a Waymo.
Oh yeah, that's good.
And I have a recording of them watching it. For them, this was unusually crazy. They were like, we had never imagined like there was a possibility. And then again, they come from India, so the background is totally different as well. The culture is different, but for them to see something like this, like sci-fi, as you were saying, right? It's like the perception of technology to them was so surreal, and for me, it was like a very formulating moment where I was thinking like, what's going on, right?
Yeah.
So it's cool.
I took my first ride in a Waymo about a month and a half ago.
Oh yeah,
Last time I was in San Francisco, and it's one of those things where I actually had the intention when I was visiting San Francisco. I'm like, I'm going to get in a Waymo this time.
yeah.
Opportunity presented itself, and I think I was, got into the car. I was nervous for about 10 seconds, and then I was like, holy crap, this is incredible.
It's
Sign me up.
fantastic. Yeah, I mean, that's the future. Do
Yeah.
you? I will ask this question later, maybe. I mean, there's. I was wanted to ask her, are you like a Tesla guy or
I own a Tesla, and I've used the supervised self-driving mode, and
cool?
it's also pretty remarkable. It's
Yeah,
like, I don't know if I feel quite as confident in that as I do in the Waymo. I mean,
yeah,
clearly one is like kind of fully autonomous, and the other ones they're still working towards. But I
right.
mean, the fact that we can actually have this Tesla, I can get in, I can put in my destination. I don't know, maybe I'll do it this afternoon. I'm going to get my haircut. I can just put it in there. It'll drive me over there. I'm like,
That
what?
it goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, I got a Tesla recently too. So we had the free trial FSD, but the funniest thing was the auto summon that I tried at a Costco.
Hmm.
And I live in Texas. So it was the just to see people's reaction to the it's like you could make a video on it. I could have gone viral on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just fascinated trying to press the button. Anyway, so talking about this idea that we sort of exist in the sci-fi, reality today. I mean, you obviously mentioned that you are using AI personally. Um, what kind of are you using mostly that for coding, or do you have fun with other models around like voice cloning or like creating images? Like, what's your sweet spot right now?
Yeah, I use it a little bit for coding. I unfortunately do not get the time to actually do any real coding for work anymore.
Yeah,
I have been dabbling back in code just to get my head wrapped around what it's actually like to use these tools for coding. So I've experimented with the usual suspects like Cursor and Windsurf. I played around with Cloud Code. It's on my to-do list to play around with OpenAI's Codex. I played around with Aider. And, part of that is I think it is extraordinarily important to actually get the experience.
yeah,
I've heard this analogy that if, it's like you want to know what it's like to, swim in water, you can read a book on it, but, you don't really know until you get in the water. And,
true,
actually using the tool is important. And, because I'm like kind of oversee the R&D department, I want to know what it's like for coding. But for actual work, I use it to summarize large documents. Sometimes we get like analyst reports and whatnot.
right.
It'll be 100 pages long. You're just like, give me the 2-page summary.
Engineers
Uh,
hate documents.
yeah. I use it to do research, competitive research. I do it to keep on top of trends that are taking place in the industry. Like you can have it run a report, like tell me about recent, developments in, SQL optimization or SQL execution, and tell me about recent developments in log structure merge trees. And it'll do that kind of stuff. I've used it
Right,
to actually understand parts of our code base. We have a very large code base, and you can actually point deep research at our code base and being like, and explain what this is doing. What is this
right.
thing? How does it work? What are the interactions? What are the invariants it's having to maintain? And it does a pretty bang up job. I've done experiments on areas I've known about, so I can validate that it's doing the right thing, and they're really remarkably good.
Yeah,
And that's the thing. I think it's actually got a lot of leverage to it too, right? Is
I
just
mean,
that the coding is one part of the engineering work. We can estimate engineers spend maybe 30 to 40% of their time on coding.
yeah.
That's the minority. They're spending a lot more time on other stuff.
True, agree. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, one of the things I was thinking when you were saying that was, some of the things that we really wanted to like touch on was like, obviously, this whole idea of productivity, right? And I think that's what you were hinting on. And interestingly, we spoke about a car, and the main you wrote a set of tweets called "AI is the car," right? And I was when I was preparing, I was thinking like this whole idea that we used to say 10x engineer, right? And how hard it is to find a 10x engineer. But with AI at workplaces and some of the things that is happening is that you can do so much more now. So just give me a little bit about what was your perspective when you put together the tweet, and how do you see it reshaping kind of like the everyday life of an engineer or anybody in general?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think the analogy is general. The analogy goes something like this: like, you know, you're, I was thinking about this in the context of someone like kind of walking along or maybe running along in their career, producing output, doing good value for their company. But you're running or walking along, right? You're under your own kind of locomotion. And as you're progressing along, you stumble upon a car, and you have a little choice to make at that point. Do I just keep on progressing forward to my goals, wherever they may lead, or do I actually kind of pause, and get in the car? And this is essentially what these AI tools are like: is you're you have this ability, you have this time right now where we need to actually kind of slow down on our forward progress just briefly to actually get into this thing and then figure out how to use it.
Yeah.
And you get in, you don't really know what you're doing. It's not like this is a different beast where you're not sure how to drive, you're not sure where the gas pedals are, you're not sure where the steering wheels are, but it's doing something, and you
Something.
can see it's
Yeah.
moving forward. And as soon as you start to maneuver this thing, you can, like, holy crap, you're already, moving faster than you ever possibly could on your
Right.
own. And my prediction is this is only going to accelerate. And that's not like my prediction. It's like this is what everybody's like kind of saying. It's like you get in, we figure out how to use these things, and the car is going to improve simultaneously with us getting better at figuring out how to use it.
How to
And
use it.
it's like kind of co-evolution there.
Right. I agree. And I think that's how it's been. My experience is also the same thing. And you were talking about like the ability to try these different tools and start applying them. I feel like what this has allowed us to do is anybody with an idea, you don't have to wait for something. You're not stuck. You can get in this car and you can say, this is what I want, this is where I want to get to, and the car probably figures it out, and then you're shocked like, how did it figure it out, but we're still kind of getting it. But I like your analogy here that it's like co-evolution, that we are both figuring it out, but the intent is you have to go try, you have to start using this. I mean, there is a big difference if somebody just sits and saying, I don't believe in this technology, I'm never going to do it. I mean, what do you think is going to happen to that guy?
Yeah, well, I've heard this phrase somewhere on the internet that AI is not going to take your job, but a person using AI is going to take your job, and
For sure.
I think there's wisdom in that. I mean, I don't see like it's hard to predict out multiple years about how this AI technology is going to improve. I mean, you can predict it's going to improve. It's going to improve dramatically,
Yeah.
but I have a deep belief that human agency is going to remain important for at least the next couple of years. That AI is an augmentation tool. I hear AI assisted, but I really like the thought of it being an augmentation tool.
Augmentation.
That
Yeah.
we're augmented by this, and this is just. I mean, we've been augmenting ourselves forever, right? We augment ourselves with clothes. We augment ourselves with cars. It's like if I want, like, how long would it take me? I told you about the haircut I'm getting this afternoon.
Yes.
That's probably like 2 miles away. I will drive there in like 5 minutes.
Right.
Walking there, I mean, it's like if we were just solely limited to our own physical capacity, we'd be so much more limited than we are. And this is another substantial evolution in that it's not just augmenting our physical capabilities, it's not augmenting our physical capabilities at all right now, but it's augmenting our mental capabilities. And
Right.
in particular, it's taking tasks that I think, this level that, maybe you become very proficient in, but that might not be valuable anymore.
Right.
I was an extremely proficient coder. Will there be value in actually writing the specific lines of code in a programming language? I suspect that's going to diminish. But there's going to be a lot of value in telling the AI which lines of code to write and telling it in English. I heard this breakdown somewhere else recently where it's like, if you want to build something, first you have to decide what to build. Then you have to decide how to build it, and then you have to, write the actual code. That's the final part. And AIs are like really starting to progress on that last part. They're starting to edge into how to build it, but even there, like especially what we're doing at Cockroach Labs, they're not able to really help with how to build it.
Yeah.
But what to build, I mean, that is still solely in the realm of humans for at least the next couple of years.
100%. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. So I'll give you a simple example. Like, my wife and she has been working on some cool ideas on her own. So when you want to make a single page application, you can just say, hey, build this for me, and it can build a simple application, and it looks great because it has access to all these UI libraries and everything. You start adding complexity to it, where you start adding a bunch of APIs, it does great. So you start building relationships between APIs and you add complexity, and that's where the context kind of gets lost, right? And so you need a human who understands and envisions how this should flow to be able to get moving. So I have seen that when you start something with the AI, it looks great. As you start evolving that into a much more complex beast, that's where the human needs to come together, and it's like guiding the AI to where you need to go. But the difference is, I could do the same thing in 6 months before. Now I'm doing it in 2 months or 2 weeks.
Or faster. And we have some examples internally where teams would have normally taken a couple months to do something. They do it in a couple weeks. So we have concrete examples. And yet this is. I mean, that's not to say that we're 10x faster as a company right now. Getting back to the 10x engineer analogy. that was always a little bit mythical
Yeah.
to some degree. But I think we are seeing a significant productivity boost in engineering and in product management and in documentation and in our training department. Every single function that I see inside Cockroach Labs, we're seeing places to deploy it. And there are areas where it's dramatic, but not like it's not uniformly dramatic across everything
Right.
involved. But this is only going to improve. I mean, the thing that is kind of wild to wrap your head around the rate of improvement right now. The good agentic systems, they can kind of go off. You can tell it to go off and do a task for like 10 minutes to 30 minutes. That's kind of the time range where they max out at.
Right.
Um, that duration, that time window where an agent can successfully complete a task. A couple months ago, they estimated it was doubling every 7 months. So,
Interesting.
in like 7 months from now, they'd be able to do an hour or maybe a little bit longer. Actually, they've just updated that again, and now it looks like it's doubling every 4 months.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and it's like you just have to extrapolate out a couple of years, and you'll have agents that can go off for a month and complete a month-long task. And
Right.
you're
Wouldn't
like,
that be a dream for a
I mean,
startup founder?
like I see this as every there's a kind of a mixed bag here, which
Yeah.
is, I mean, this presents an interesting opportunity for reimagining just how much an individual can accomplish. And I've heard the phrase that we're all going to become managers of AI agents. I think that's
Hmm.
really true.
It's
Um,
going there.
but there's also this big risk that if we don't get on this soon enough, and our competitors do, that they will pass us. We want to get it
Absolutely.
on earlier to get this, like get in front of them.
Right.
But you have to presume all the competition is doing the same.
I agree. I agree. I mean, what you said. I'm still digesting that because pretty profound. That you have no choice. We do have to do what we need to move ahead, and if we don't do it, somebody else will do it. That threads into another trend that I know I was thinking about it while you were speaking. Is there is proprietary models and there's this idea of open source models. Where do you land on that? Do you think that in the AI space, everything should be proprietary, or do you think there should be a sense that open source models should be continuing? There should be effort towards growing them and improving them as well. How do you feel
Yeah,
about that?
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, there's like real open source models where we actually see how they're trained. There's open weights models where we have the weights.
yeah,
I think there's a lot of value into companies producing good open weights models. They give something for researchers to research on. I mentioned this mechanistic interpretability stuff.
right,
Well, researchers can research the closed weight models. They can research the open weight models and try to decipher stuff from them, which is, super important, both for AI safety and just for, making sure that academic research maintains some relevance. So I think the, open weight models are extremely valuable. They'll also probably feed into, getting models onto devices as well. And yet I also believe that the proprietary models are going to maintain an edge for some period of time. And it's not like they're having to advance rapidly to stay in front of the advancements of the open weight models. So
right.
how long is that window right now? Are they 6 months in advance, a year in advance, maybe that time window? But there's real utility to being on the bleeding edge of the models, even though they cost more. I mean, the open weight
Right.
stuff is going to be dramatically less expensive.
Yeah.
And yet sometimes, it's like, I mean, I want to be able to have that agent that can actually write CockroachDB code. It doesn't really exist yet. When it
Yeah.
comes out, I want to be on the bleeding edge using it to
Exactly.
help with CockroachDB.
Absolutely. And I think I also swing between those elements. Like, I think that open weight models are essential and are important for the progress that humanity needs to make as a general. Like, I think it's great that we have 10 companies working on AI models and not one, right? I think generally
Well, I
it's like,
mean, the competition here right now is just awesome. I
yeah,
mean, OpenAI makes some advancement, Google's making some advancement, boom, Anthropic is there, X.AI with Grok. Oh, and then you got the China guys with DeepSeek. What
yeah,
is Meta doing with Llama? It looks like they may have a stumble on this most recent one. I haven't really paid enough attention to comment on that fully, but it's like,
yeah.
I think the competition, I mean, this is the most kind of robust open competition, and you can see it just accelerating us.
Yes. And it's
The,
wild. I mean,
it's
this is
great.
why it's happening right in front of your eyes. There's a meme. I don't know if I'll send it to you after this. Is like keeping up with AI news and this guy with like super red eyes. I was like, I haven't slept whole night because I went to sleep. There was like a big update, and then OpenAI comes up in the morning, and they're like, "Yeah, we did better than that," you know. So it's
Yeah,
like, and
yeah,
it's not just happening with the AI models; it's happening with the ecosystem also. Like there's Windsurf. Like Windsurf makes an improvement, and Cursor's like, "I made an improvement." Then there's another system called Lovable. They're like, "We are doing this," and there's this bunch of companies trying to do that. And I was just talking to another friend of mine who's working on his own startup idea, and he's also like, well, we are doing this with AI, and he's like, I added this because our competitor did this last week, and we need to make another improvement. So it's fascinating how it is going. But coming back to the workplace idea, right? And I think we have to start embracing AI at workplace, and I think Cockroach Labs embraced it, and we all are like, start using AI wherever we feel is best. What is your advice, or any ethical considerations that you want to give to people who have not taken that step? Like how should they start thinking about adopting it in their actual workflows and into the company's ethos?
yeah. I mean, I think the very first step is, getting in the water, getting in the car, whatever way analogy you want to use there, get the
Right.
firsthand experience. And this doesn't actually have to be for something, like a real thing that you're trying to solve now. Maybe it was a problem you just solved a month ago or something you did a month ago. Oh, let me see if I redid that work, but I was using AI to help me out there. Or just get in there and have a chat about some personal problem with
Hmm.
ChatGPT. I mean,
Right.
this is a very remarkable and easily accessible thing. Everyone has some kind of personal thing they're navigating with their spouse or a friend or whatever it is, a parent.
Fair.
You just get in there and ask it to be your therapist. And
Right.
that is like, I think, the easiest, most remarkable experience where it'll do a bang up job.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, that's my first advice towards adoption is just really get that experience. And then you're going to have to start thinking like, okay, looking for the places inside your organization where it can be utilized. We're starting to see the emergence of one particular pattern that I would encourage, which is, what I might describe as the champion or influencer pattern, where
Hmm.
you're going to have some people inside your organization, if it's any size, that are really leaning into this stuff, and you're going to have people who are kind of more reticent. You don't have to push the reticent people right away, but that person who is leaning into it, get them using it, and then get them, it's not even get them using it, unblock them from using this,
Yeah.
and then get everybody, like have them start proselytizing. So you don't
Yeah.
have to be doing it singular. It's like you want to train one person, get them aboard, have them train two more, have them,
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
pyramid fan out there.
Yeah.
The other kind of interesting thing that I saw kind of early on when we were starting to beat the drum about AI was a little bit of a reluctance of like, is it all right for me to use this stuff? It feels a little bit like cheating. And I
Hmm.
think there is this aspect that we already, I think, overcame this in Cockroach Labs. It didn't take that long, but you kind of want to normalize that using these tools is not cheating. And I
Yeah.
think you do that just by, having leaders signal. It's like, hey, you know what? I took this 100-page analyst report and I fed it through and it digested it and produced this summary. I used ChatGPT to do this, or I
Yeah.
used Cloud to do that, and just kind of normalize the usage of it. Make it so that it seems like, oh, it's obvious you should be using it, and just signaling it. And then after a period of time, it's like everybody's doing this. You don't have to say it anymore. But it's just like to get
Yeah.
people over that hump of like, no, this is
Exactly.
normal. And then you want to make it expected. Everybody's just expected to be using AI tools.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the significant things to do to normalize it. So I'm glad that you brought it up, right? So I had another question. Now, this is like, I know we have to be cognizant of the time here, but the question I want to ask you was, do you think there is a future where Cockroach DB will be available for an AI agent or like as an MCP server at some point in the future? Do you
Yeah.
think there is a possibility of that? You don't have to
Yeah.
give me the secrets, but yeah, there you go.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting. You mentioned MCP, Model Context Protocols, this protocol that Anthropic pushed, and now, um, you know, OpenAI is involved in it. Now there's a whole ecosystem. Google also announced support for it. So absolutely will CockroachDB be used by agents. I think there's a real prediction for the future that I feel pretty strongly about, which is the majority of database access will be done by agents at some point.
Yeah,
It'll still be done by applications, but it'll be done by agents, interacting through applications, right?
yeah,
You're going to have, you're already hearing like the early whispers of this of like, oh, I'll use an agent to book my flight or book my next trip. And that in some sense is just the indirect usage of the agent using your database. And there very well might be direct usage of it.
yeah.
It's spinning up using like V0 or Bolt.new or Lovable to create an app, and then it automatically spinning up a database behind the scenes.
Right.
The specifics of it using MCP, I mean, MCP is one access point to it. I mean, these agents can, these AI systems can also write SQL directly.
Right.
So it's not clear that you need to provide something different than SQL. Is that SQL over the MCP protocol, or is it SQL over something else? And like a little bit hard to predict some of that
At this
aspect
point, yeah.
right now. But absolutely, will agents be using data stores? And I think I feel really excited about CockroachDB because I think we're going to see a quite significant increase in data usage over the coming years, particularly operational data usage, and that is our wheelhouse.
Okay, that's awesome. No, I'm excited. I'm excited for that future. I feel like I love when we can make something that used to move at say 5 miles an hour, and if I can turn it into 10 miles an hour, I love that. That is efficiency, and I think human society and human identity is about progress. In many ways, I believe in that. I don't know if you noticed or if you read about this. Jan LeCun recently came on a talk, and he was saying that he's done with LLMs. You know, he's like. He's done it. LLMs are boring, and what he's interested now is in world model, and this idea that there has to be a model that can think about the world and move with the world, and is going into like that reasons how the world moves. So yeah, it's fascinating what's happening with that. Have you ever considered where this will be going?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it a little, just trying to follow along with like kind of the research. You also come across the prognostications about like
Right.
what the effect is going to be on the world, and it's going to be pretty significant. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you're hearing Dario Amodei, the Anthropic CEO, you hear Demis Hassabis, Nobel laureate, DeepMind lead about like, hey, you want to cure disease in 10 years, cure, aging in 20 years. I'm like, if you'd heard that stuff 5 years ago, you're like, oh, you guys are nuts. And now it's like, there's kind of like you squint, like from a distance, and I'm not as close to this stuff as they are,
Right.
but there seems to be a path that they're pushing towards. So it's pretty exciting. I think we're gonna like see a remarkable amount of first progress in software engineering, and then progress in science fields. And they're starting to be rumors that scientists are already finding value from these
Oh yeah.
new reasoning models, and that's only going to increase. And
Hundred percent.
like I can't remember what I was reading this in regard to, but it's like like the foundational biological process progresses at some rate per year, and if we could double or triple that, it would just be incredible for like kind of just the fundamental biology.
Oh
And
yeah.
they maybe expect that they can 10x it or 100x it.
Right.
So we're going to see advances in medicine, clearly advances in education, but then I think it's like it just starts to spread out to other areas from there.
I agree, and I think what you said is already happening with robotics. Like the speed at which robotics has, accelerated in the last 2 years is like exponential to the AI adoption as well, right? But that leads us to, our rapid fire round, and this is obviously the AI predictions round. So you gave us a great segue into this. So here's what you have to do. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and you have to answer that in one word or one sentence. Okay, so we're going to make it tough for you, and if you screw it up, we'll edit it out and we'll repeat it again, so it should be fine. But so I'm going to ask you your first question. If AI could help you master any skill instantly, what would you choose?
Piano.
Very good. Okay, cool. Looking ahead, name one or two industries that you believe that AI will have a big transformative play in.
Medicine and education. I mean, both of those, whew, man, the ability to have one-on-one AI tutoring would be transformative.
Brilliant. No, I agree with that. So if AI were to write a song about your life, what genre would it be?
What genre would be? I'm not sure about the genre. Um, hmm. I kind of like listening to kind of renditions of kind of classic rock and whatnot that are kind of reinterpreted on like new instrument like piano or guitar. So it'd be something like like Fleetwood Mac or Pink Floyd.
Great
But
choice.
yeah, yeah.
Great choice. Great choice. Those are my go-tos. Okay. Uh, okay. We were talking about robotics. Do you feel we will have AI-enabled robot nannies in 10 years?
Ooh, yeah, no, I'm not quite sure about if we'll have it in 10 years. Yeah, no, I can see that. I mean, I'm just looking, my kids, kind of like at the driving age, and I really want the Waymo to be available. So I have like the robot chauffeur for them. We're going to get the robot chauffeur first. I can see
Yeah.
having the robot daddy. I want a little Jetsons action going on there.
I know. I think we would all love that, right? My daughter is 7 now, and she has to start driving. So after I did the Waymo, I was like, I would just love for her to, like, just be safe all the time, you know. So
Yeah.
brilliant. Okay, one last question. Okay, uh, in the next 2 to 3 years, what is one of your bold predictions around AI? Like, obviously, we spoke about something. Like, you can mention it in the same. What will become normal for in 2 to 3 years with AI in the
What
tech
will
space?
become normal with AI in 2 to 3 years? I mean, one of the remarkable capacities of humans is how they just get used to things so quickly, you know? And I mean, I think that the ubiquity of AI in our lives is going to be kind of transformative. We saw the early promise of this with Siri and Alexa as home assistants, but I think we're just going to see these assistants everywhere, and they're
Nice.
just going to be easily accessible. And that doesn't require a breakthrough in robotics. I think we see all the pieces for this, and it's like we need Apple and the other device manufacturers to kind of come up to speed. But just ubiquity. I'm in my car, I can just be like, hey car, do this, do that, and you can kind of do this already today, and it kind of still sucks. It doesn't work very well. And just,
Yeah.
I mean, the voice models are great, the text to speech is great, and they haven't hooked it all together. It's going to be all hooked together, and then we're just going to be like, how do we survive without this? Like, just
Hmm.
like the same analogy is like, how do we survive without Google Maps?
Right.
Like no one can navigate anymore without your map application. It'll be the same thing. Like just easily
100%.
have all that information just instantly on tap.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's so fascinating that you today can take a 16 gig, SanDisk USB, put a model on that, take a laptop, make sure you have some solar powered stuff, and go live on an island, and you have the history of humanity in a pen drive. You don't need anything else. Like that's what we have gotten to. Just
Yeah,
fascinating, right?
it's
So
crazy.
it's amazing. Well, Peter, it's been such a great time talking to you. I hope you had a fun time talking. For everyone listening in, go check out Peter on LinkedIn and on Twitter. He puts some really cool. You have a tendency to write like broken down threads, which like what like 10. So it's like a very
Guess
thoughtful.
what? David AI is helping me with that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's another use case. So we'll take that. So follow Peter, follow Cockroach Labs, and some of the cool stuff that we are doing over here. We have a great space where we release lots of cool engineering blogs as well as blogs around some cool use cases that our customers are using. So come check them out, and we look forward to listening to you or hearing from you in another episode, Peter. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was wonderful.